First up with Kane Corns, thanks to Sportsbet, I'm Sarah, Olle and Kane. The Lions have gone back-to-back, easily far too good for the Cats, 47-point winners at the MCG yesterday, and it begs the question, is it dynasty time for Chris Fagan's side?
Or is it already? What a performance. I mean, it's one of the great grand final performances that I've ever seen. When you look at the challenges that they faced this year, the draw, I guess the 7 seasons of finals consecutively, so that means you have a shorter preseason, the injuries, the retirement of Joe Danaher, and all of that, and some form issues with some players, to be able to stand up there and lift the Premiership Cup up again with the squad as young as they are, and we'll get to that shortly. I just think it's one of the great grand final performances, one that I just didn't predict was coming, and to be fair, not a lot of people did.
You couldn't split the two teams at halftime. It was 36 apiece, but from there it was all one-way traffic, and it was a midfield domination from the Lions. In the end, Kane, they were plus 15 in clearances.
Yeah, so that was their real strength throughout the final series. After that qualifying final, they were so strong from stoppage. They put a real emphasis on it. And when you think of a couple of injuries that they had, we'll get to Lachie Neale shortly, but no Berry, and 2 rucks that are not star-studded rucks at all. And if you're a team that is thinking about spending big money on a ruckman, don't do it, because Oscar McInerney and Fort win you a premiership again, and those two would be well under the average wage. So there's smashing. I think it was 8 goals from stoppage. Their small forwards, once the ball hit the ground in their forward line, just absolutely torched Geelong's defenders. And then their big players came to play when the game was on the line. That was Neale, that was Ashcroft, that was Rayner, who had been well held with some big moments. And this from Lachie Neale to Ashcroft, we saw that last year in the grand final, where I thought those two were the best players on the ground last year. They did it again in the second half, and the chemistry that they have is amazing. So credit to Cam Bruce, who's their midfield coach, and the collective unit. I noticed after the game they had just a midfield photo out on the ground together with just everyone involved in the midfield. That's how important they were to this result.
I'm not sure how your CV looked at 21 years of age, and I guess the only issue for Will Ashcroft is that he might be peaking a little bit too early in life, Kane, because he's not just gone back-to-back when it comes to premierships, but back-to-back for the Norm Smith medals, and now he's in elite company. Andrew McLeod and Dustin Martin, the only other 2 players to do that.
How about that? And the age that he's done it. But it wasn't just his last 2 grand finals. His final series collectively, there was a lot put on him and a lot of responsibility with Lachie Neale injured for a large part of this year. So to do what he's done, his record on the MCG is astonishing. He loves playing on the MCG. So when's his contract out? Because what's the figure that our team is going to come for him? Now, I know the family history, father, son, the success that he's had. So Brisbane won't have to pay market rate to get him, but there's going to be offers coming of 1.5 upwards of $2 million if Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller is on just under 2. This is the guy that's done it on the big stage. So he's the next $2 million player in the game. I think that's going to be factual. Now, whether he opts to take the offers that are coming is another thing, and hard to see him leaving Brisbane, but he's in for one of the biggest pay rises that we've ever seen, and he deserves it, because when the game's on the line on the biggest stage of all, he's done it. And he's a 21-year-old, Sarah, but he's not alone, because they're stacked with youngsters.
Let's have a look at some of the young talent time, because these young Lion Cubs, I mean, look at some of the names and the ages they're Kane. They've all had massive final series and moments to be proud of.
What about Wilmot? 14 finals. Hasn't missed a game since he debuted. 14 finals. He's 21.
Wild.
You wouldn't think he's
Wild.
21. Logan Morris, the guy that was eating McDonald's, not that long ago, a year and a half ago, is now a 2-time premiership winning key forward who's kicked 50 plus this year and stood up as the sole key forward. When we're all talking about Joe Danaher retiring and who's going to replace him, even the Lions didn't know who's going to replace Joe. We got Gallup and Logan Morris, and they won a premiership there. We got Fort and Oscar McInerney in the ruck. We got Gardner taking care of Jeremy Cameron. There are storylines everywhere, but what the facts say is that this group is not going anywhere, provided that they can remain hungry with the success that they've had and the confidence that they will take into winning from any scenario. It used to be an issue for the MCG for the Lions, not anymore. They love it. So this is a frightening proposition, and wait for the whinging from other clubs about father, sons and academies. That is coming. That's going to be a big storyline this off-season.
So you keep receipts, Kane, and I do too, and I might not be throwing them flamboyantly in the air as you have done in the past, but on this show last week, Kane, you said to play Lachie Neale, to select him in the grand final, would be one of the most reckless selection calls of all time. Did he prove you wrong?
Well, they managed him perfectly, I will say. So to select him in the 22 would have been the most reckless thing I've ever seen. And I still, to be fair, I wouldn't have taken the risk on him as a sub. But this is why Chris Fagan is an absolute master. This is why he's the best psychological coach that I've ever seen. He's the most loyal coach that I've ever seen. And if one of his gun players puts his hand up and says, I'm ready to go, he picks him. Now, he wasn't confident, because if he was confident, the dual Brownlow medalist starts in the centre bounce for the first bounce of the grand final. But he was confident enough that the calf was okay, and it was just a matter of the conditioning. So credit to Chris. We'll get to his record with some of his plays shortly. And Lachie Neale, to do what he did and to heal as quickly as he did, I've never seen anything like it. Like, he popped that calf genuinely out for the season, sat in a hyperbaric chamber for 2 weeks and got himself in a position where he only played 40% game time. So it was like 50 minutes, but it was perfect with the impact that he had and the right time to bring him on as sub.
I'll tell you what, give me those 50 minutes any day of the week. A huge goal, 17 possessions and 7 clearances. Only one more player on the ground had more clearances than Lachie Neale. I mean, we're enamoured when it comes to what he's able to do, Kane, but his legacy, if you are projecting forward, where's he going to sit?
Well, I'm not speaking out of school here, and I hope Bruce McAvaney is okay with me sharing this on the massive AFL platform and with you, Sarah, but I was standing on the boundary line after the game with Bruce, and he looked at me in his way and he said, well, he's definitely an automatic inclusion into the Australian Hall of Fame, but I wonder if he's a legend. I think he's a legend. I wonder if he's a legend. And that was Bruce. And I think Bruce is probably right. Like, when you look at the dual Brownlow medalist, the dual premiership captain, the All-Australians, the best and fairest, I think he probably ends up with Patrick Dangerfield of the two that were playing in that game yesterday as legends in the Australian Football Hall of Fame. That's how good his resume is now, and that is what was at stake for him putting his hand up and recovering from that calf issue. I don't think we're having that conversation if he's not a dual premiership player and captain yesterday, but I'll take Bruce's word for it.
Me too.
I reckon he's going to, and it's going to take 30 years, but he'll eventually get there, I think.
Now, Charlie Cameron, we've often discussed him throughout this year because he's had an up and down season. I spoke to him post-match and he was the first to put his hand up and say, look, it hasn't been my most consistent year, but his coach, Chris Fagan, continued to back him in when those among us, Kane, you were calling for him to be dropped, and it materialised, didn't it, the loyalty on the biggest stage in September?
Yeah, not for the first time with Chris. That's why I just think he's a psychological master of coach and just, as I said, the most loyal. Like, I think even last year, he probably wouldn't have given games to the likes of Logan Morris and Lohman unless some of those players, Link McCarthy and Kitty Coleman was another one, got injured. That's the only way these sort of youngsters were able to force their way into the side. But you're right. I thought certainly the qualifying final was Charlie's lowest ebb this year. He 2 touches. I thought his contest work was awful. I thought his body language was poor. We highlighted that on this program. So to respond like he did on the biggest, now his 4th grand final, I think it was his 29th final. He's now kicked 54 goals in finals. That's his record now as a big game performer. And I mean, one more goal, he probably wins the Norm Smith, I reckon. So well done to him. But more importantly, well done to his coach for backing him in again, like he has done with so many of his players.
And when it does come to big game performers on the biggest stage, I mean, we do fall in love with the big key forwards, don't we? But I think history is now proving that it's the small to mediums that get the job done.
Yeah, that's why I kept those receipts from the Adelaide tall forwards. So I don't know if you need them. Like, as much as we love key forwards, and yep, of course you want to get one, and Melbourne have been searching for one for ages, and Collingwood will go hunting, and even Brisbane's going to sign Oscar Allen. So you do need one or two, but when it comes to finals, you need a contest and you just need to compete. So you need key forwards that are competitors so that the damage can be done by your midfielders and your small half forwards. And Brisbane, they're absolutely stacked. And I think when it goes back to what has this premiership been built on, it's been built on a great balance through their midfield, offensive flair, but defensive players like Dunkley. And then the stars in the forward half that just light up. Zach Bailey could have kicked 7 in a grand final. That's how good he was. We know about Lohman and his record in finals. We know Charlie Cameron, we touched on that. They're everywhere for Brisbane, and they were the difference yesterday.
Speaking of competitors, Brandon Starcevic is just that, albeit at the other end of the ground. What a role he played on Geelong skipper Patrick Dangerfield, limiting him to just the 10 disposals. But he's got a big decision to make now, Kane. West Coast calling with a big lucrative offer. He's going to weigh that up in the coming days. I guess with this head knock again, though, does he come with a bit of buyer beware should he move to the Eagles?
There's no doubt, and you wonder how watertight that contract is for the Eagles. But firstly, let's give him the credit for he's probably the hardest player to get a kick on, and we've seen him do great jobs before. Isaac Rankin springs to mind, but his diligence on Dangerfield yesterday and the coaching with that. So it was let Dangerfield go centre bounce, but after that, go everywhere with him, and he just blanketed him. Like, I just thought Chris Scott gave up on that matchup where there was no more danger in the midfield. He just sat him in the forward half for far too long. So Chris got that wrong. He was out-coached in that aspect by Chris Fagan. His future is now a concern clearly for himself first and foremost, and that's where our thoughts go. And we've spoken about that before. Concussed him round 1, didn't come back till round 14. And he's going to leave reportedly, and it's a long-term deal. You just wonder how watertight that is for the Eagles because they must be really concerned about that.
It's now been confirmed that Geelong superstar Jeremy Cameron, he played out the grand final loss with a broken arm. Let's hear from his coach, Chris Scott, post-match.
I'll say one thing. I hope this doesn't sound like sour grapes. I think we all, and I'm at the head of the queue, will be rapt to see the back of the sub rule. It feels like a bit of deja vu in a respect that, we were sort of waiting and didn't feel like we could make that sub until we had some clarity there. But again, it's like in the heat of the moment, it's hard to work out. Is it a crack? Is it a decent break? Can he play? Can't he? And that took a long time to work out. But obviously, he was heavily limited from late in that second quarter.
Sour grapes or not, Kane, I mean, it was an impactful decision whether or not to keep Jeremy Cameron out there. I mean, it's now been revealed that he was playing with a broken arm. Did the Cats just mess this situation up completely?
Doesn't say a whole lot about Reece Stanley, does it? And the confidence and the decision to play him when they subbed him out when they were still worried about Jeremy Cameron and what to do. Like, he spent 17 minutes on the bench and in crunch time, and then they subbed Reece Stanley out and they went again with him. So that says that. I haven't watched all of his press conference, so that is just clearly an isolated portion of it. I'm sure Chris would have paid credit to Brisbane as well, and Chris, yes, and had done all that. I personally would rather coaches speak to their truth and what they're thinking after the game. So I try not to be too critical of them getting a point across that makes sense. And that makes sense. And he's not alone, and it's been a long push. So, yeah, maybe that decision had already been made with the AFL and they're going to remove the sub. It's a year too late. But I'm one that Chris usually makes a fair bit of sense. And if he's got something to say and make a point, I don't mind giving him that platform to be able to do that.
For the last time this year, it's time now for the temperature test, thanks to Sportsbet. And this is a bit of a look into 2026, where you project teams to be going. And intrigued to see that you've got the Dogs and the Swans running hot. These are two sides that didn't play finals, Kane.
I like Sydney. I think their back end of the season was really strong. Get some healthy players back. I love the Bulldogs. They're absolutely ready to go. So they don't need a whole lot with their playing list to be in the conversation to win the premiership, provided they get their coaching and their defensive structure right, which Luke Beveridge has been unable to do. And then Brisbane, we've spoken about that, and their young players coming through. Hard for anyone to be on the same level playing field as them. And then there's some clubs with some real decisions to make in the off-season. They've got to get it right. Essendon, what are they going to do? Have to get the off-season right. That's going to be a struggle. Melbourne's the same. McVee's the latest player to want out. We don't know about Petrarca, so tough one for the new coach coming in there. And then how to put Adelaide get better as well. I've got some concerns about that and their list, but fascinating, and that's why the next 2 or 3 weeks over trade period is pretty important for a number of those clubs to absolutely nail.
The silly season, it will begin. Well, this has been First Up with Kane Corns, thanks to Sportsbet. A big thank you to everyone behind the scenes who's gotten this little but mighty show to air every Sunday. And congratulations to the Brisbane Lions, back-to-back and perhaps on the verge of a dynasty.
What's gambling really costing you? For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.